What's the password? Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. Brought to you by the record button.
Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Game Master Speakeasy. Come in out of the rain, pull up a chair, grab a drink. If you are of age, it can be alcoholic. Either way, sit down by the ever-burning hearth and tune in. I'm glad that you're here. My name's Cody. I am a Game Master. And that is why I'm here, actually. I like being that, and I'm going to continue to do that as long as I am able. I'm joined by my buddy right here. His name is...
Lance,
for those who don't know, he was one of the people that got me into tabletop games, of which now is a core brick of my life.
kind of the old hat around here.
I have two major regrets in life. One of them is that I did not make smarter investments at a younger age for things like Bitcoin and Tesla and Microsoft. The second being that I didn't get into tabletop games until I was well in my 20s. That's one of my biggest regrets.
I think both of those things are fair.
All right, so what's new?
Not much.
No.
It's been a slow week, actually. We haven't had any game sessions between last recording and this one, so...
That's true. Let's talk about news first.
What do you got for me?
I got a couple things I want to talk about. I know a lot of the times we talk about new Kickstarters that are probably gonna... Who knows? By the time that you discover this show, this Kickstarter will have probably well ended, but it might be a product you haven't heard about. There is a... Don't get me wrong, we're not playing 5e right now, but people keep making content that is 5e adjacent, and I love a good book that you can use that's pretty setting agnostic.
All right.
Or system agnostic. Either way, system or setting agnostic. And I have found a Kickstarter. It's called Amazing Encounters and Places, and it is for, I believe, 5th edition, but the Amazing Encounters and Places is it's exactly what it is. It's that you can drop into your game a regional map for locations, including like coastal places, forest places, mountain swamps. For those that have never heard of it, actually, you and have partaken in a session I run. I just love any product that you can adapt to your own game, like with a little work. You might have to convert stat blocks or whatever, but things that make the game master's prep time easier, love it all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're a player out there, one thing you might not realize is exactly how much time your game master puts in to making that game session work. You show up and you might play for 3 or 4 hours on, a one night a week. There's a chance your game master's probably put in 2 to 3 times that many hours preparing, putting the campaign together. A lot of times the communication they have with you between game sessions to make sure that everybody's on the same page, or to make sure you understand your options as a player and what your character can take. So anything that helps to streamline what a game master needs to do, anything that saves time in that regard, is a godsend if you're on the other side of the game master screen.
Don't forget to thank your GM this week.
Yeah, no doubt. buy him a 6-pack if you're of age.
If you're, or a 6-pack of whatever their favorite soda is.
Yeah, which you don't need to be of age for that. So.
We are the Game Master Speakeasy, but we encourage anyone who has an appreciation for tabletop RPGs to stick around and hang out while we carry you on this little bit of a journey today.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to talk about some of our failings, our weaker moments as game masters. But first, I have another piece of news that I keep forgetting to talk about, and that's Pathfinder Nexus.
Okay, so tell me about this Pathfinder Nexus.
So you know about the world's most famous tabletop role-playing game, and how it has something called D&D Beyond attached
I'm aware
to it.
of both of those things, yes.
The good people at Paizo have paired with a prolific partnership, a group called, I think, Demiplane.
Okay.
Is the name of the company that they're working with. It's basically D&D Beyond for Pathfinder.
Okay.
So you're gonna have your character builders. Source you can buy PDFs to use not PDFs, but you can buy content to unlock just like how you can in D&D Beyond. And I think that's going to be useful for the people that have come to. There's a lot of people that play D&D that just use D&D Beyond for all of their stuff.
Things,
They don't own source books. They don't do anything. They don't own PDFs. Everything they do is on D&D Beyond.
Well, and I mean, there's something to be said for using technology to streamline any of these things. We've talked about it in previous episodes, but like the Path Builder app, for example. I think that makes life super easy for your players, just to have that app available.
Yeah.
So, I mean, an online resource for any of this stuff is going to help to streamline. It's going to help to make things easier. And like you said, it's going to have access to content and things like that, usually at a pretty reasonable price, if it's anything like D&D Beyond is.
I gotta say, I don't know that I'm gonna use Pathfinder Nexus, because most of the time we play in person.
Yeah, that's also true.
We play in person, and I like physical books. So we have physical books, and we have the rules online that we can look up. So I don't know if I'm gonna use it, but for people that are playing online, sure. And that'll be good. I think that'll be good. I hope it does well, because I really like Pathfinder 2, and I want more content.
I mean,
always.
More options is generally always better.
All right, so that's all I've got for news that I wanted to talk about.
So rather than you asking me about what I've done this week, why don't I ask you about what you're doing this week?
That's true, because we haven't had a game session.
Yeah, so I got nothing there.
in between game sessions, I'm always, we play in a homebrew world, so I do a lot of prep work just for fun and need. I'm going to quote a guy, all right, as I digress back to my previous point. There was a guy, he's a publisher, he's made Stars Without Number, which you have played in.
Yeah.
It's a system that you can find on DriveThruRPG. There's a free version that has like 95% of the rules in it. He's also released a new one within last year called Worlds Without Number, which is the fantasy equivalent of it. And I believe it was in his books. A lot of his stuff in those books is made to help Game Masters prep, even if you're not using those systems. Like, you can take the stuff in Worlds Without Number or in Stars Without Number, and you can do things like the faction turn. If you want to have a bunch of factions in your world operating behind the scenes, it's a cool little mini game for the Game Master to play that actually advances the factions' goals in your world.
And it's not so tied to the actual rule system that it can't just be transplanted into other systems. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, and so a lot of tools in these games you can use are system and setting agnostic. And so I like a thing like that. And there's a quote from Kevin Crawford about preparing for the prep work that you are doing as a game master, and it is, I'm gonna just paraphrase it. It's something along the lines of whatever prep work you're doing, it should either be enjoyable. It's prep work that you are having fun doing. You are enjoying the world building. You're enjoying making the maps. Or B, it should be relevant to the very next session. And once I picked up on that philosophy, I found that prep work is a little bit, less stressful for me. I only ever prep stuff that's relevant to the next session, or I do it because I'm in the mood for it.
That's good, because chances are if you prep 5 adventures ahead, we'll break that sequence so hard.
Oh yeah, I
used to do a lot of that actually.
already in Lancer, I kind of originally had the game that we got going. I had planned for it to be. You guys are probably going to stay on that planet, but already you guys have expressed interest in getting a ship and getting off world.
I have.
Yeah, so the good thing I didn't prep 5 sessions ahead.
We still got to get enough money for the ship, or enough resources to get it.
In that regard, I like to participate in something called National Novel Writing Month, and for that, and whether you publish it or not, it's a fun writing experiment where in the month of November you try to write 50,000 words. Don't worry about going back and editing. The goal is just to write 50,000 words between the beginning and end of November. And I have once in my life actually managed to complete this goal.
That was last year, right?
No, 2019.
Okay.
2019 was the first year I did it. I did not do it in 2020. And in the months that I do National Novel Writing Month, I don't run a whole lot of games.
Yeah.
But the novel that I'm writing is prep adjacent, because it is a novelization of events that are canon in my homebrew world. And I know that, I wrote the first 50,000 words in 2019. My group read it, and I'm glad that
it was great. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Those of you that did, I feel like it was. You read it. Did it make you more engaged with the homebrew world?
Yeah, it helped flesh out the setting. It gave me kind of an idea of what was going on and why, which helped a lot. But it was just well written, to be honest with you. And
I will encourage dungeon masters, game masters, to do this. Write. You don't have to write 50,000 words, but write a short story here and there of your homebrew world. And don't be offended if your players don't read it, because I know some of your players are not readers. They are not there to study the rule book. They're there to have a good time. But you might have players that are, and they're going to enjoy it. And and they might engage with your world, which is one of my which is something I will bring up again in today's topic. But first, what are we drinking today? We are in a speakeasy where we sometimes enjoy beverages that may or may not include alcoholic content. We are men of age, so we can do such.
I will almost universally be consuming something with alcoholic content. Let's not pretend otherwise. What we are drinking this week is another local brew. We drink a lot of local brews, don't we? That's good, because we have a lot of good local brews here. This one is a black ale that is adorably named after...
well, we won't say the direct quote. But
no, but it is referencing the movie Dune, or the book, both of which are delightful.
Well, it depends on the person you ask, and depends on which movie.
Well, I mean, I've seen them both, and the new one's way better than the old one was, but I mean, I'm glad the old one existed, because if it didn't, I don't know that we would have even gotten the new one.
If you have read Dune and haven't seen the new movie, you should at least give it a go. I saw it 3 times.
Yeah, I've seen it twice already, and I saw it before I started reading the book, and I'm about halfway through the book now, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah, they advertise this beer as this ale as having hints of maple, cinnamon, and melange.
It's pretty good, actually.
All right, so I kind of like it. I'm enjoying it. It does have an interesting flavor to it.
It does. I mean, you can taste the things that they say in it. I hope my eyes turn blue. Well, more blue.
More. Yeah. You've got blue eyes already. They're not quite. So they're not the.
The whites need to turn blue. I haven't gotten there yet.
That's true. So speaking of Dune, actually, there's a for those who don't know, I think there was a. That's another. Yeah, it's news to you, maybe. There is a Dune role-playing game that launched.
It came out this year.
It did.
I mean, so it's newish news, is in the sense that it's happened at least
by Modifius, and they're the publishers and developers, I believe.
I'd be interested to see how it goes. I would imagine that it's going to probably have a lot of politicking in it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I have the.
It might involve. I don't remember exactly, but I think you might even make your own house.
That's what I read about it. It
okay.
said something to that effect. But I think it'll involve a lot of politicking, which you need the right group for something like that. I've had an old copy of Vampire the Masquerade lying around somewhere.
Which edition is that? If you know,
I honestly don't.
I've had it for a 5th now.
I've had it for a very long time, so I would probably imagine 2nd or 3rd edition, maybe.
All right. Because you're ancient.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm kind of old. But we never played it because I never felt like any of the people in my group would really want to roleplay the politicking as much. And that's a setting where, unless you guys pick a very specific clan whose sole purpose is largely combat-based, that most of that game is just going to be a lot of posturing and things like that, which is it's not a bad thing for the right group.
It's a more role-playing centric game.
Very much so, and I would imagine that a Dune game would be a lot like that, too.
Oh, yeah.
If you get the right group, it would be phenomenal, but I think if you get a group it's really combat-oriented...
Well, I've never played the 2D20 system on which it is based. And what I can tell you is that system is what Star Trek Adventures uses. Okay. And in Star Trek Adventures, each session is supposed to be an episode of your version of Star Trek. And there is very narrative focused, I would say.
A lot of politics.
Because I haven't played it, but a buddy of mine has played in a game, and he would give me his personal campaign diary of what they were up to in their game. So yeah, it's everything. We're keeping it all on task here. The beer's got spice in it.
The beer's got the spice.
And now I can see the future. And in the future, we will play tabletop games.
In the more immediate future, we will talk about some of our greatest failures as GMs and our greatest successes.
Yeah, you want me to start, or you want to
start? Go ahead, you start.
Okay.
I'd like to hear where your take is on this, because you know mine.
As you know, perhaps, I love this. I love being a game master, but I am fairly fresh. I would say that I have a knack for it, but I am still finding every week just chiseling a little bit more of the. It's like you're revealing a marble statue, and I arrived as a slab. Each week I'm
slowly cut off pieces as it gets closer to what you want.
It might not be a masterpiece, but I think the end result is going to be pretty good. I feel confident in it. There's a lot of things in life that I am not confident about myself, but tabletop role playing and game mastering, I have not an arrogance, but a confidence that I will lead you to interesting narratives and fun.
For what it's worth, you've been doing this less than half the time that I have, and I think you're better at it than I've ever been.
Is it less than half or less than a quarter? Or?
Well, let's see. How many years have you been at this?
4. And you've been at it 25.
Yeah, okay. So We're talking, 20
Less-
less than
six.
20%. Yeah, but you're good at it. I mean, you do have a knack for it.
One of my weakest moments does come from our normal long-running 5th edition game, and it is your primary character, who is a warlock named Aram. And usually, especially in new systems, they tell game masters to only roll the dice at dramatic moments where failure would be a dramatic outcome. Don't roll for your mechanic who's trying to fix a couple loose nuts and bolts, right?
Mm-hmm.
You make your mechanic roll if you're trying to fix a cannon in a short amount of time so that you can launch it against a monster
under
that's
enemy
incoming.
fire.
Under
kind of
enemy
thing,
fire, right? While it's dramatic. And you usually roll if there is a chance of success and a chance for failure. But I had you roll in a social encounter with a green dragon who was the tender of a garden. You guys were after a special magical reagent. I was inspired by a piece of 4th edition D&D art where they had like this crystal flower in the Feywilds, because you guys were in the Feywilds.
Yep.
And you... basically, this crystal flower was tended to by this dragon, and it could be used as a powerful reagent in any potion, spell casting. It was basically a homebrew item in that regard,
Yeah.
where it would crank whatever you had up to 11. You could cast a first level magic missile, and that thing's coming out the other side, a level 11 beefcake blowing on the top of a mountainside. And so it's a very sought after resource, and you guys were there to get it and to stop the big bad evil guy from getting any.
That's
right?
correct. Yes.
And so Aram, he is as a warlock with a maxed out charisma score, and he's proficient in diplomacy and deception. You're the face of the party. And so you engaged with this dragon confidently. You crushed your roll.
I mean, I don't know if I was confident, but I didn't want to fight it. And
Well,
I thought if
yeah,
I could
yeah.
talk my way through this, then, that was a better answer.
The last thing you want to do with... Well, you know what they say about war is that it is the least efficient form of diplomacy.
Yeah.
So that's what you didn't want. You did not want a war against a giant dragon.
I was trying to negotiate something from him, trying to figure out what I needed to do to get it
Yeah.
without having to, fight a dragon.
And I might almost call this a form of pre-fudging. Because the DC was as such that at the level you currently were, you could not hit the DC.
Got it.
If you were a level max 20 character, not unlike a poison that happened at a later point in time.
I remember that too.
So if you had been a higher level with a higher proficiency, it would have been at least a small, if not tiny, chance.
I was proud of my 24.
Yeah, it was 24. I'm pretty sure it was 24. I'm pretty confident about it. It was either 24, it might have been 25.
Somewhere in that range.
That's
high roll number.
For those that have played the world's most successul and famous tabletop role-playing game, as you will often find it described in the products. Products are always saying that these days. Oh, here's a product for the world's most famous role-playing game. Just say it. You can say it. We know what it is. Maybe there's a legal reason they can't say it, but it's for D&D.
Yeah.
And the problem was that I let you roll. You were like, I want to convince this dragon, and I called for a diplomacy check for which there was no possible success.
So basically, you're just saying you should have told me no.
I should have told you no. I feel like at least in 5th edition, there might be systems like Pathfinder 2 has secret checks, and they're secret for a reason. Like if you recall knowledge and it was impossible, you don't know anyway.
You just
right?
know you didn't roll high enough to get it.
There's a reason it's a secret check. But in 5th edition, there's no secret checks, and there's no reason to have a person roll if they don't have if there's no chance of success, because you rolled, you crushed your number. In 5e, there's bounded accuracy. A 25 is awesome, no matter what situation there is. So the second you see your 25, you feel tell me how you felt in that moment.
I felt like I'd accomplished something.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I wasn't going to get what I wanted, but I figured he wasn't going to pick a fight with us immediately.
Right.
Which he did pick a fight with us immediately.
And if I was a better GM at that time, I could have had you fail forward despite it. Like your 25 represents a good performance and a solid argument. I could have at least had, because the reason you failed is because the dragon had already met with the bad guy.
Yeah.
The bad guy had told the dragon who you guys were, but at the very least, I could have failed you guys forward, and I didn't. I had you roll initiative. And I consider that to be one of my biggest failures as a GM was because you had a great role in it, and I feel like I railroaded you guys into combat instead of having a moment where you were able to, like, sure, in retrospect. Oh, we can call upon Captain Hindsight, right? Like, hindsight's 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Knowing that now, if I could go back, what I would have done instead is, yes, this dragon has met with the bad guy, but he's still a dragon. Maybe he'd be willing to cut you guys a deal and double agent against the bad guy because of your wonderful role. Or play both sides or whatever,
Or if the big bad had leverage against him, maybe he offers to help me if I get rid of that leverage,
right?
Whatever that may be.
Something, right?
Yeah.
There should, because of,
You're saying there should have been an option outside of combat.
There should have been an option outside of combat, and that's one of my biggest mistakes as a GM in general, especially starting with games that have a lot of combat. I tend to, especially in 5th edition. 5th edition is, we talked about Vampire the Masquerade. That's a system that assumes role playing, whereas 5th edition and Pathfinder, those are systems that assume combat. You in Warhammer fantasy roleplay, you could roll up a character that's just a beggar. At the beginning of the game, you know what you're good at? You know what you're good at? You're good at panhandling. You're good at being grungy on the side of the road. You're not good at swinging a sword. In 5th edition, every character you make comes with a combat toolkit.
Yeah.
So combat is assumed, and so I think I have, because I was running 5th edition, I had a combat bias. And despite your, it's against social encounters. I don't embrace social encounters enough, or at least I didn't. That is something that I made a mental note after that mistake, because if you're gonna make mistakes, you should learn from them.
That's true. I mean, now, for what it's worth, I did get my vengeance. We've killed at least 2 generations of that dragon's family.
Her family is upset.
Very upset.
So there's one of the big bad evil guy has one of each chromatic dragons as an ally, not a minion, as an ally, and you have killed 2 of her children.
Yeah, no, he was one of them, and then his little sister got
That was the first dragon the party ever fought.
Yeah.
Was the young green
dragon.
Got riggedy wrecked. So that is my worst offense, I think. That's my worst mistake as a GM, is calling for a roll when it wasn't needed. What about you? What's your worst mistake?
Boy, there's a long list here. I mean, I've got tenure here as far as time in
25 years.
I think the player really enjoyed this, but I think probably just the sheer amount of, irritation it brought to the campaign. I'm going to go with one of my Deadlands players. He wanted to start with a knack. Now, if anybody, listeners out there, have played Deadlands,
they haven't.
No. Well, there's got to be a couple of them, right?
Let's be real. They're probably playing the Savage Worlds.
That's true. Well, the older version, the 2nd edition, Deadlands Revised, as it was called. When you made your character, you could take. The whole character creation was drawn out of a deck of cards that determined your attributes.
I love the deck of cards.
I actually really like that as a character creation system. But
we also worked in a casino.
Yeah, we did. And I allowed all my players 3 draws, and they could take their favorite, because I never wanted anybody to come out with a character that just sucked because of bad luck. But in the earliest edition of Deadlands, I believe, you could purchase these things called knacks. Well, in the revised edition, you could only get the knack if you drew an ace on your mysterious past, I believe is what it was.
Yeah, so not only did you have to draw a joker during character creation for your stats to get a mysterious past, but then on your mysterious past, you had to
draw an ace from a 54-card deck.
Yeah, 1 in 13 chance.
So...
Oh, well, 1 in... Not technically. Were the jokers part of the wild...
Yeah, so, you'd be talking
4 in 54
4 in 54 chance, yeah.
Yeah.
And what these knacks would do is they would allow you to spend a chip, which is kind of your advantage, your bennies, your hero points, whatever. Except you get a lot more of them in Deadlands because they have...
It's the metagame currency.
It's the metagame currency. Would allow you to spend one of those in order to have certain effects. Like Born on All Hallows Eve, for example, could be used to empower your magic. If you had a legend chip, which these were difficult to get a hold of, and they had a lot of cool uses... But if you could use a legend chip, then you could, if you played a huckster or a mad scientist, you could get the highest available result for your spell or your construction roll or your blueprint roll for your gadgets. The one that this particular player took was called Cat's Breath, which the minor abilities allowed for things like night vision and to fall distances without taking damage and a temporary increase in their nimbleness score. But the legend chip ability gave the player 9 lives.
Oh my god, I didn't know this.
Yes.
I've never heard this story before.
Here's how this plays out with this knack. If the character is in a situation where they will inevitably die, or if they have died, they can spend a legend chip in order to not die. And then they put 1 tick mark on their character sheet, and once they hit 9, they're out of them. So, I mean, there's a
So you had to spend a legend chip each time you died?
Yes.
Okay, so that's still...
still
hard to do.
What this really caused him to do is hoard the ever-living crap out of legend chips, because it was basically his invincibility button.
Yeah, so he's holding on to these, and even if you tried to get him to burn fate chips to negate wounds...
Like, he was not sharing the legend chips with the rest of the kids in the party. He was, if he drew one, it was in his pocket forever, or until I wasted him.
Do you remember how long ago this was? Like, in real world time? Like, how old you were? How many years ago was this a bet? Because he was playing Scorp.
This was playing Scorp.
A recurring character that he sometimes rehashes.
This would have had to have been before 2003, because I joined the Army in 03. This is before I went off to the Army. This was...
Oh, wow. So you guys were... Late, teenage years.
I believe this campaign was before that. So this would have been early 20s at the absolute latest. So
Lance
I'm 40
with hair.
now. Yeah, back when I still had hair. So that was cool. And... the only real comeuppance I had, and spoiler alert, well, you don't get spoiler alerts for this, but I mean, if you're just getting into Deadlands and you're worried about knowing what's really going on with the Harrowed, just
don't do it. Don't spoil it.
I mean, I guess okay.
No. I'm telling them not to read it.
Oh.
Don't look in the marshals section of the handbook.
Yeah, well, that too.
Yeah.
Which I'm guessing at this point nobody's got spoilers over this, but
maybe.
Technically speaking, it never said that I had to keep them alive. So after 2 or 3 rounds of him escaping death due to this legend chip thing, I brought his character back harrowed intentionally.
Oh.
Which was nice, because at that point it gave me an inside man, because there was a demon living inside of his skull.
Yeah.
But, and I mean, don't get me wrong, the player had a really good time with it. I don't think it detracted from the game. I think the biggest part of that mistake was the fact that it made my life so much harder. Because I had this just basically invincible gunslinger running around. If he had a legend chip, he could do whatever he wanted. Well, I would say whatever he wanted, but that virtually whatever he wanted.
That comes back to one of the primary, I would almost call it the core tenets of game mastering, is that you were worried about making him feel tension or drama.
Yeah, and it made it hard for...
It felt difficult for you to challenge that character.
And the worst thing is, in order to challenge him, the kind of things that I had to do would have put the rest of the party in overabundance of danger that I didn't want them to have to suffer just because they had this one dude in the party that was...
Did you ever get any blowback or criticism from the other players in the group for letting Dan buy an act?
No, not really. No, and to be honest with you, at the time, I think I would have let any of them do it.
Okay.
I mean, because the old rules, and I think there was even an optional rule in the revised where you could let them buy the knack for like 5 bounty points at character creation.
That's cheap.
Well, I mean,
for a knack,
that's basically 50% of the total amount of points they could spend on edges.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, it's a considerable investment, but it's an outsized power for that amount of investment. I mean, not that I would ever go back and let anybody use knack or buy knacks again at character creation, but if I did, I'd probably make it a 10-point edge.
Okay.
Like, it would be all of their edges, period, full stop. That's it. You know,
it's just that good.
It is really that, and I mean, so many of them are that good. Like I said, I mean,
the only knack I remember reading was Twister, and I think that one sounds like a lot of fun.
See, I don't remember that one.
I think you get like control over wind and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, the Cat's Breath one was the one I'm familiar with, and I remember the All Hallows Eve one, because I always thought, man, if you had a huckster that cast a spell and took the legend chip...
All Hallows Eve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Born on All Hallows Eve.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean...
the point of the lore of Nax is it had to do with the day your character was born.
Yeah, it had to, some circumstance surrounding their birth,
Gotcha.
or their very, very early childhood. And All Hallows Eve would allow you to get a Royal Flush on a spell that you cast. You didn't even have to roll.
What?
Yeah. Now, if you remember the damage codes on some of the damage spells for a huckster with a Royal Flush.
So, for those at home, or for those near us, next to the hearth, hucksters would cast spells and then draw a poker hand from a deck of cards to see how strong their spell was. And and it was the same with the mad scientists. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like you could build a time machine, but you needed like a royal flush to get it right.
At least
or something like
well,
that.
at least the time machine with the base build time kept that thing, because the base build time on it was like a year.
Yeah.
So if your character got the royal flush, you still had it was 20 years, I think.
It's a lot of downtime.
Yeah, it was
It's a heck
very
of a lot
unlikely, very unlikely that your
No, I,
characters
I
would
want to
ever.
say it was. I don't think it was. I don't think it was 20. I think it was like 10, maybe.
Might have
5.
been, but I mean, the point is that
it was a really long time.
yeah, there was really no practical way to get one of those. So, what about some of your best moments as a GM?
All right, I enjoy some of my best moments. I feel regrettable about Finn dying in that the champion in our Pathfinder.
Yeah, we
game,
talked about that last
because
episode.
there are some people in my home game that don't always know their character, and you know that is something I have gotten a lot more patience for. I want to say, especially in like the midpoint of GMing, I became kind of a real hard ass about it.
As a fellow player, I have gained no patience for that because I typically know my character.
Yeah, that's true. You're trying like even if you're a spellcaster, your turns go by pretty quick because you know what you're doing. And that isn't to say that there aren't moments where my players, don't know what they're doing, but like a lot of the time, sometimes they forget or they forgot to read their new spell. But anyway, he was trucking along in that combat. He knew what he was doing. Every turn was going by quick. He was being tactical, which. I will say in Pathfinder 2, it's a tactical game, but you don't feel the need to be a munchkin. You know, unless as long as the game master is making balanced encounters. You know, not all of them are extreme encounters. You're also getting some mook enemy encounters in there to do make you feel strong. You don't need to be completely efficient to have fun in Pathfinder 2. You're going to experience great gains if you work as a team to get that efficiency. But I would say that my moments of pride, it's hard to nail down a single one. Every time, it's more like a symphony or a medley of small moments that have happened. All those times where, you know, people come through and they know their mechanics, they've paid attention to what's going on in the world. You know, at the beginning of every session, I have one of the players do a recap. And sometimes the players account everything that happened to the last session in perfect clarity. And I'm like, oh, awesome, they are paying attention. I am leading them to the well, and they drinketh from it. There's been a lot of moments where you guys go off role-playing with each other. I think all game masters, if you've ever game mastered a game, you can relate to this, where you just sit back, and for like half an hour, you don't say a gosh dang word. The players just keep role-playing amongst themselves, right?
That is a great thing as a GM, because what that really means is they have just saved you 30 minutes of content work. Like, if you get in there and your players really dig into the RP, and they're having a real blast doing it, and then they end up running that for 30 minutes to an hour. Well, I mean, what do you think 30 minutes of gameplay translates into in prep time?
Oh, God. Well, if it's a combat, if it's 30 minutes of a combat encounter, that's saved you at least an hour.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I mean, like, there's some definite returns on getting your players into a real good RP scenario where they're operating without you.
What took a 3-4 hour session prep time involved maybe 6 to 8 total hours of prep that I did, because I did the layout of the entire academy. I stocked it with NPCs and loot, and you guys went straight to the MacGuffin. You stumbled upon the MacGuffin, the plot device, skipping the entire academy.
Screw the investigation. We're just gonna bumble around and accidentally find our way right into the middle of the plot. It was fantastic.
Yeah, everything was, and don't get me wrong, that's part of being a GM is rolling with the punches, and I had a lot of fun doing it. But if I had to pick out a single moment of pride, it was the toast. Now we don't have enough time to talk about the entire Trader's Toast today. But the moment...
You know what? I'll tell you what. I will give up my best GM moment to hear you get as much into this as you possibly can before the end of the episode.
This came from your, like, if I hadn't played in your Deadlands game, it would have never occurred to me to ever do this.
Okay.
But when your group split the party, you would have us go into the other room, and sometimes we would, like, a couple of us would go into the other room and just chit-chat for half an hour while the other half of the party is separated.
Yeah.
And so and then you would switch us off, and the other group would have to just hang out in the other room for half an hour, chit-chatting, flipping on their phones or reading a book or whatever, going through the rules. And then when we come back together, sometimes people would share what happened with their group, sometimes it wouldn't. It really, there's nothing like preventing metagaming, like not even being at the table.
Oh, yeah.
I will say that I often had complaints about it because at least half the time we would just figure out, they would just share what happened, and I was like, well, we could have been here the whole time, and
Didn't need to go out and chill out.
we didn't need to go out, but then then there's the other times where we didn't know what happened, it was incredibly rewarding. And so taking. Oh yeah.
I was just saying, I've always found that it depends on which characters are separated and which ones aren't. If you've got kind of the shadier characters, they tend to be way more reticent to tell the rest of the party what happened in those scenes. Whereas if you have the more open and friendly characters that are the ones that are finding out the super secret squirrel stuff, they tend to share it.
That is absolutely true. Because there's people in our main group where they often will squirrel away their secrets, they don't. And there's other players that want to know. Oh yeah, Aram or Dan as a player, not a character. He likes to have his character secrets.
Yeah.
And then there are other people in the party that will push and
open
push.
book, transparent,
transparent, and they want to know everything you're doing.
Yeah.
And they get there like, no. So where did you go? What happened? They ask a lot of questions.
Just handle some personal stuff.
Just some personal stuff. So I'm going to sum it up quickly because I still want to hear some things you're proud of. But basically, the single moment, I can still remember the look on Brittany's face when she turned to her husband, who was turning traitor to the rest of the party. And I thought she was going to divorce him right then and there.
She was not happy.
When it finally clicked in her head what was going on, I'll tell the whole story. I could tell the whole story will take up half an episode some other time.
That's true.
But what we can talk about then is that'll be a story for a topic when we talk about people working with the GM secretly. Because if done right, it's
idea.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
And in Deadlands, you have multiple stories for that. But basically, we had separated the party at the end of the session, and long story short, 2 of the players met with the big bad evil guy and cut a deal.
Yeah, no,
and
I know.
When that deal came to fruition, your character got kidnapped, and half the party was joining the bad guy. And the look on everyone's face was amazing. I think it is one of the most memorable moments.
That temporarily ended that campaign.
It did. It put full stop to that campaign because most of the characters were either kidnapped or turned traitor.
Yeah,
or
just we're not having it.
Yeah,
They're
so
like,
it was like it was kind of lost. It was almost it was a form of total party kill where not a single character died.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it was a complete separation of the guild.
I don't know if I'd have let the dwarf die on the beach.
So that was, if I had to pick a single moment of pride, that'd probably be it. Other ones include when you guys got Ulrich back. You coming together to rescue the guildmaster. I thought that was a really good moment. All those little role-playing moments add up, though. It's a combination of all those moments where people engage with your world. When people ask about the history, that really builds up. What about you? In all your time game mastering, what's your most proud single moment?
Well, this is the kind of thing that I think, much like your story, to go into great detail would be something we'd have to do like an entire segment on. But I had a character in Deadlands. You'll find that most of my Deadlands, stuff, or most of my history was with Deadlands.
You've got a lot of
got a lot of Deadlands. I got
a lot of time.
I got a lot of West. I got a lot of scary cowboy stuff in my history.
Yeah, spoopy dudes with lassos.
Yep. So, the infamous Dan that we often talk about.
Yes.
He made a mad scientist, and from the outset of this campaign...
Wait, hold on. What's this mad scientist's name?
Hans Gruber. And yes, he played him with a German accent, and it was freaking wonderful. So, he creates this character from the outset, and this is a secret him and I kept from the entire rest of the party, literally until his character's demise. He had a wagon that had his entire laboratory in it, which he was super duper...
Steam wagon, right?
Yeah, I think so. And about keeping it locked up. And it turns out that Mr. Hans Gruber, Dr. Hans Gruber... had lost his wife in Germany before immigrating to the United States in the Old West. He had saved her head in a preservative jar with the intent of figuring out how he could resurrect her. So... throughout the campaign, the party ends up finding Dr. Victor Frankenstein's diary.
Yeah. The actual Victor Frankenstein.
The actual Victor, in canon, his diary. The rest of the party didn't really understand why this was so important, but Hans knew. Hans needed this. And this whole campaign, well, not the campaign, but Hans was never a character that was intended to live for a tremendously long time, and Dan knew that.
Yeah.
By virtue of how he created the character and the story behind him, he knew that this guy wasn't going to live long. So they eventually end up in the city of Shanfan. If you're familiar with Deadlands, you know it's basically the replacement for San Francisco after the entire California coastline gets dropped into the ocean by a big old earthquake. Read Deadlands history.
But that's a story for another day.
I don't have time to explain all of that today. So Shanfan is a predominantly Asian town, and they're investigating something else entirely different there. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, local prostitutes start disappearing. And basically what it was Hans and me scheming without the other players in the room to know what was going on. He was collecting parts so that he could finally use this book that he had got and the severed head of his wife to reconstruct this new wife. Like I said, we managed to keep for a fairly huge portion of this campaign this entire plan secret.
Oh, yeah. And none of the other players suspected.
Well, not only that, but I red herringed this reporter that was there.
There was the journalist.
There was the journalist there that had gotten close to Hans, and Hans needed her. Hans might have just had the brain. I think he needed her face. He needed her head.
Oh, okay.
Because she reminded him of his ex-wife.
The journalist kind of looked like his ex-wife.
So I red herringed her, and the rest of the party thought she kidnapped Hans.
Yeah, because she was investigating the disappearances, but they had gotten because I'm not a part of this campaign, but I've heard the story a lot. But she was investigating these disappearances, but the party started to think she was causing them because she wanted a good story.
Yeah,
right?
I basically red herringed her, and everybody thought she was the bad guy that was doing all this just to get the story. And when Hans disappeared, they thought she was the one that kidnapped him. They tracked him to this old barn that he had put all of his laboratory equipment in and basically built himself a little Frankenstein lab out there.
Yeah.
To find...
It's probably on the edge of town, right?
It was a ways outside of town.
Yeah. Oh, the creepy barn ways outside of town.
And when they found out that, they stormed the barn thinking they're going to be saving Hans, and they find him just after he'd resurrected her. And, of course, the party attempting to be good guys is immediately freaked out about the fact that there is now this, patchwork chick in this barn. And so they freak out, and they try to fight her. And, of course, Hans, now in an attempt to defend his new zombie wife, starts firing back. Now, being a mad scientist, he's got a, fully auto shotgun that he built himself.
Yeah. And I mean, it's got a malfunction score, but if you don't roll that malfunction die wrong...
So what ends up happening in this is the party, kills each other. We had one survivor.
Yeah. Because he, for being an old dude with not great stats, he was rolling well, right?
Well,
or did he have a really high gunslinging?
He had a pretty high shooting skill, but I think really it was just the fact that he had, he had the technological advantage. He had all that science gizmos.
Auto-shotty or something like that.
Yeah, so basically, he's firing at them to protect his zombie wife. She's attacking them as any good patchwork creation would do.
And it was only a 3-man party, right?
Yeah, it was a 3-man party.
2v2.
It was Flick and it was Patty.
And Flick was an agent, right? He was an
former agent.
He worked for the agency, right? And Patty was just
drunk gunslinger.
Yep,
right? Drunk
right.
gunslinger. Pretty simple.
Yeah. So you've got the man and zombie wife versus those two, right? And do you remember how? Oh, is this where the legend ship Dynamite came in, or was that a different?
No,
thing?
This was a different thing. This was what basically happened, if I remember this correctly, is Hans bodied Patty with that shotgun. Just dropped him like a sack of puppies. And
oh no, the poor puppies.
While he was on the ground, zombie wife started chewing on him and finished him off.
Oh man.
At this point, Hans was fairly...
That's when Patty...
That was Patty's death.
That's when Patty bit it?
There was one survivor to this whole thing, because then Flick kills Hans, kills the zombie wife, both of which had been injured during the earlier part of the altercation.
And was there any... It was full-on sanctioned PvP at this point,
I mean,
right?
listen, if I got PvP going on, I'm not fudging it.
Yeah.
Okay, there would be none of that. So I let it happen.
Yeah.
Flick was the sole survivor because we ended up rebuilding the group around him for the remainder of the campaign. But
yeah, it was just when I joined the Deadlands game.
Yeah, that was... You joined immediately after. And that was... I liked that moment because the betrayal was you could taste it in the air.
You could cut it with a knife.
This group had been together. They had been Flick had been infested with this really nasty form of rabies. Hans treated him, and that's the only reason he even survived that.
Oh, yeah.
This party had been through a whole lot of crap.
Survived that Wendigo.
They survive the Wendigo up north. Yeah, and like the whole thing happens, and then the whole time it turns out. I mean, I wouldn't even say that Hans was planning to betray them the whole time.
There's something about the Deadlands setting that really binds the posse together.
Yeah, and so basically the whole group self-destructs when they find out what Hans's actual motivations are, and none of them saw it coming.
Yoko Ono.
None of them saw it coming. None of them saw it coming. But yeah, that was probably my proudest, or at least one of my proudest moments in gaming.
It shines in your mind when asked the question.
For sure. And I mean, Dan will tell that story all day long. He loved it.
Oh man, that's a wonder. And we could go on and on about this.
Oh yeah,
but,
we got stories for days.
Krugar says it's last call. So if you want more of us, you can find us on the recordbuttongroup.com, along with other shows produced by the Record Button. You can find us on social media, such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find updates and news. The email is, you can send us questions, comments. We want to encourage people that hear this to do that. If you want to tell me that I sound stupid, all right, that's fine. I'll just delete it. But if you send something that's more interesting, like, hey, we want to hear about your player characters you've done, or whatever else. We want to take questions and maybe feature them on the show. So you can email us at gmspeakeasyofficial@gmail.com. Share us with your friends. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Don't forget to rate and review, maybe drop a comment too. Until next time, I'm Cody.
And I'm Lance.
And this has been the Game Master Speakeasy. Please get home safe.